Huge shakeup with a division rival. Pete Carroll, longtime Seattle Seahawks coach, is now out. What does that mean for the 49ers? What does it mean for the Seahawks and their head coach going forward? A lot changing. What a day in sports. Nick Saban gone as well. And I think there's more to come on the NFL landscape. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. It is what we do. Appreciate the everydayers that are with us, and give us a subscribe. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube and subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On 49ers is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. I didn't see this one coming. I mean, I know Pete Carroll's in his 70s, and it's, the end is going to be near for he and all of us, and we don't know who's going to be alive Sunday, like Kyle Shanahan likes to say. And the Father Time is undefeated and all that. But I was a little bit shocked of the news that came down Wednesday, Croc, that Pete Carroll is no longer going to be head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. I want to read the full, if I have it here. Yeah. So here's the full statement from the Seattle Seahawks, from Jody Allen, the chairperson of the Seattle Seahawks, running the show over there. And it goes as follows, quote, "After thoughtful meetings and careful consideration for the best interest of the franchise, we have amicably agreed with Pete Carroll that his role will evolve from head coach to remain with the organization as an advisor. Pete is the winningest coach in Seahawks history, brought the city its first Super Bowl title, and created a tremendous impact over the past 14 years on the field and in the community. His expertise in leadership and building a championship culture will continue as an integral part of our organization moving forward. Pete will always be a beloved member of the Seahawks family." So that is that. Pete Carroll will no longer be running the show for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, at one point, Legion of Boom era, Pete Carroll's Seahawks were a problem for the 49ers. That hasn't really been the case recently, and I wonder if that is part of the reason why Pete Carroll's no longer the coach of the Seattle Seahawks. Correct.
This was shocking news. Well, kind of shocking. I didn't think it was something that would really happen, but I did see my guy John Milikoff kind of talk about Seattle maybe making that change and Pete Carroll kind of stepping down from the job. So he somehow foresaw this coming, but I definitely did not. And it's kind of a bittersweet moment because something about rivalries, right? It's hardly been a rivalry. I think it was like a legit rivalry 2013, 2014. Outside of that, it was completely one-sided, either one way or the other. Seattle just stomping the 49ers out several straight times, or the 49ers stomping Seattle out. But it feels like they, for it to be a real rivalry, it has to be what it was in like 2012, 13, 14, in that range where it kind of goes both ways. Hasn't been that for a while. And I always felt like Seattle would figure it out because of who they had at head coach with Pete Carroll. And now that he's gone, I mean, this is going to be very interesting. Still, it sounds like he has somewhat of his fingerprints on certain things kind of going on there. And he wasn't just a head coach for Seattle. He was a part of kind of like football operations or something like that. But now taking a lesser role, and I'm not mad, but I kind of miss the good rivalry times.
It's the end of an era for sure. Nick Saban stepping down as the Alabama head coach as well. I mean, these are coaches that have been around for a long time, and 14 years is a long time to be a coach anywhere. In fact, Croc, does it shock you that Kyle Shanahan is now the 5th longest tenured head coach in the NFL after Pete Carroll stepping down as head coach of the Seattle Seahawks?
Well, someone had asked me on social media said, how many coaches have the 49ers gone through since Pete Carroll arrived in Seattle? And I'm like, man, I think Kyle's like 5 or 6, which he's actually the 5th head coach. But he's been there for a while. And I think because of how fast this time is going, I tell my wife this as well. Whenever you're trying to accomplish something, I feel like time just goes at warp speed. And the 49ers have just been on this run of really trying to win this championship year after year after year, that the 7 years or however long it's been with Kyle Shanahan has really flown by. So typically, like, that's a long time to coach one team. 7 years. Head coaches, the turnover rate is so high. We saw the 49ers go through several head coaches over a few year span. And even then, outside of that, I mean, you see head coaches be coaching a team for 2 years, 3 years, around 4 years, they're usually out. But to see Kyle Shanahan not only reach this amount of years, but I don't see this ending anytime soon. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool for the 49ers. Were in the dump. I've seen you fighting with fans on social media about like how bad the 49ers were, and they kind of forget that. But this dumpster fire before Kyle Shanahan showed up.
Yeah, it wasn't, things weren't going great for the 49ers. If you get out of year 3 as a head coach, you are cooking in the NFL. And a lot of the conversations have been around, because a lot of fans want to keep Adam Peters. They want to keep all the assistants. And of course, the fans do want that. And so they start talking smack about other organizations like, Washington, Los Angeles Chargers, they're a trash organization. Why would Adam Peters want to go there? It's like, well, the 49ers weren't doing great things at the time that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch showed up, right? And so they have become.
How often do good organizations fire a general manager? Like, usually when things are going well, you're rocking, you're rolling. There's not going to be a whole lot of turnover at a GM spot unless somebody gets poached or something like that. But again, even then, that's somebody kind of lower on the totem pole. Your head coach, your GM, they're in lockstep. You have a good organization. Of course, there's no turnover. Like, the teams that fire their head coach, fire their GM, they're the ones that's going to need an Adam Peters to kind of right this ship. So to think that they're just going to go to the most perfect organization, leaving the 49ers is going to be a better situation for them. No, it's on them to make a bad situation good, like we saw with Shanahan and John Lynch with the 49ers.
So Kyle Shanahan tied 5th. Sean McVay and Sean McDermott were both hired in that 2017 hiring cycle. And so all 3 of those guys are tied there for the 5th longest tenured coaches in the NFL. And above them is Andy Reid. The Chiefs hired him in 2013. So 10 years there. John Harbaugh since 2008 with the Ravens. 2007, Mike Tomlin was hired with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Bill Belichick, 2000 since he's been hired with the New England Patriots, and that one could come to an end too. Like, that was the one I expected to hear today, and which shocked me that it was actually Pete Carroll and Nick Saban were the ones that were out with their teams. And we might hear about it later tonight. We might hear about it tomorrow. I don't think Bill Belichick's necessarily out of the woods yet. And there was a big meeting. The fact that we haven't heard about what happened with that meeting with Bill Belichick and ownership and the Patriots tells me that there's maybe some conversations going on there. And I wonder if they're trying to work out some sort of a trade. And I know that Amy Adams Strunk, who is the acting owner and CEO of the Tennessee Titans, said that, they could have probably traded Mike Vrabel, but they just didn't want to wait and spend that time, because it could take a few weeks and puts you behind as in your own coaching search. And they said it wasn't worth it. So they just went ahead and fired Mike Vrabel. So, this is the most big time class of available head coaches that I've seen in a long time. And how insane, Croc, would it be?
Don't say it.
If Jim Harbaugh came to the Seattle Seahawks, the team that was that big rival in 2012, 2013, and coached the division rival Seahawks, Croc.
You know, the interesting thing, outside of Jim Harbaugh, you don't hear a lot of the college coaches' names popping up right now, in the sense of, who's going to be taking over for some of these teams. It's all of either young offensive coordinators, guys from kind of the Shanahan, McVay tree. But typically, there's like, who is that hot college name? And right now it is Jim Harbaugh, but you typically hear several. A name that's not being mentioned, because I've already heard his name being thrown in for the Alabama job, and they're like, oh man, he's already got one foot in the door to go to Alabama. Oregon's head coach, Dan Lanning, I could see him already knowing the Pacific Northwest and Seattle saying, you know what, here's a bunch of money for you, leave Oregon and come to Seattle and be our head coach. And you know what? you like that guy, Bo Nix, he's going to the NFL. You can even bring your quarterback along because he's likely going, I don't know, he'll probably go top 15, but wherever Seattle is picking, they might have an opportunity to jump up and get a guy like that. And, kind of got a long-term pair there. So that would be something interesting. Who knows Bo Nix more than Dan Lanning, but also someone who's been a terrific coach so far in college football. Young, too. That's what they're looking for. He's 37 years old.
Yeah, the young, hot, new coach is what a lot of teams are looking for right now. That's a good segue, Croc, because you're talking about their quarterback. And what does this mean for Geno Smith? What does this mean for the 49ers? What does this mean for the division? More on the big shakeup here in the NFC West with Pete Carroll out with the Seattle Seahawks, and why 49ers fans, this could be good. This maybe could be bad. There's a lot of 49ers fans dancing in the street that the big bad Pete Carroll is gone out of the division, but that could be a bad thing, I think, too. We'll get into that next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Around the New Year's, we get obsessed with how to change ourselves instead of just expanding on what we're already doing right? Think opposite of new year, new you. How about new year? Keep making the current you better. Therapy helps you find your strength so you can ditch the extreme resolutions and make changes that really stick. So if you've been thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you do is you go to BetterHelp.com/lockedon. You fill out a brief questionnaire and you get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you don't hit it off with that therapist, that's okay. It happens. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Celebrate the progress you've already made with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. I got to wonder, Croc, how Geno Smith feels about this, because Pete Carroll's been his champion, right? And brought him into the organization and trusted him. And he was the guy that was taking the first reps. They brought in Drew Lock, but it was always Geno Smith that was the number one, and Drew Lock couldn't take the job away from him. And if there's a new head coach there, a new coaching staff, they'll probably be looking to find a new guy, the next guy after Geno Smith. Maybe replace him immediately. Who knows? But Geno Smith was at the press conference with Pete Carroll speaking. And I want to talk about Pete Carroll for a second, too. We haven't seen the last of him and his quotes from his press conference. But here's a photograph. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, and I'll try to explain it for those audio-only listeners, and you can go find it online. Geno Smith, let's see if I can zoom in on this photo, because Geno Smith just looks a little bit worried in this photo. I got to zoom in on that, because he is basically his hands in his face, and maybe he's just tired and half asleep and doesn't care at all. I don't know. It's just a snapshot, but he looks like, what just happened? He looks like his life is flashing from his eyes in the photo that I saw. So I'm going to see if I can find a better zoomed in one than the one I just put up on YouTube. But this could be the end of Geno Smith. And look, right now with Pete Carroll, Geno Smith, this is not a scary Seahawks team. They could find it could be Jim Harbaugh. It could be Bill Belichick. I don't know what it could be. It could be the next hot coach that's a superstar for a decade. Maybe they find a superstar quarterback as well. So I kind of like the 49ers playing against this version of the Seahawks. So while Pete Carroll has been a really good head coach, there's potential that they could maybe get better from this as well. So I don't think that 49ers fans should necessarily be super stoked on this move. But at the same time, I've heard other names like, Dan Quinn, the defensive coordinator from Seattle, coming back home, and that wouldn't get me shaking in my boots. And so that's kind of what I'm rooting for, is Dan Quinn ended up getting that head coaching job with the Seattle Seahawks.
All the retreads all the time, like the guy that coached here, then it failed, then okay, we're going to go over here and turn it around. I know a lot of this stuff is dependent on the quarterback position. For a long time, Seattle had Russell Wilson in there kind of manning the ship, and I think that really helped him like kind of keep things steady, even though it never went over the top outside of that one year when they did win the Super Bowl. Bringing in somebody, like I said, young, Dan Lanning, come in, even if it's going to be Geno Smith. Let's say Geno Smith, you want to continue to kind of have him there, whether he's a placeholder until you find the guy, which I think that's important as well. Again, maybe not a quarterback that's going to make you a Super Bowl favorite, but at least you just won't all the way stink with Geno Smith. I think he should be intriguing for any head coach that takes over Seattle. Now, 49er fans, and again, they have this kind of skewed thought on how quarterbacks do against them. Like, that's just what they are. So when it comes to Dak Prescott, 49ers view him as he is not a threat. And it's like, well, outside against the 49ers, who typically have a terrific defense, Dak Prescott's pretty damn good. He puts together really good years, led the league in like passing yards and touchdowns and all that stuff this year. But against the 49ers, for whatever reason, he struggles. I think Geno Smith is another one of those guys who, again, he's not like the greatest quarterback, but he's a solid quarterback. And again, having to play 49ers twice a year, I think that's tough. You know, if the 49ers were doing bad, you flip it and Seattle wins, like they're a playoff team the last couple of years. So Geno, I definitely think should be somebody who's there as a placeholder, but he also should be worried because you never know how the new coach is going to kind of view you. And I like the zoomed in picture you got there.
It looks like he's either sleeping or he's like, oh my God, this might be the end for me. That's kind of the look that Geno Smith has on his face there. So we'll see. A lot to be determined there. They could get a superstar head coach, maybe a retread, maybe a young up-and-comer, but we're going to have to find out what it looks like. The new
Mike Vrabel?
Seattle Seahawks. Mike Vrabel. That could be. And I wonder if. So Diana Rossini was on ESPN, and she's a plugged-in reporter around the NFL circles, and she said that there are teams that had coaches that you thought were safe that started to rethink things once Mike Vrabel got fired. Like, he's thought of that much to where teams are like, oh, well, you know what? We're going to keep our guy, but if we get Mike Vrabel, maybe we won't keep our guy. I don't wonder if Seattle Seahawks are one of those teams.
Seattle? I mean, I'm trying to think of another team. Maybe Eberflus? Is that his name? The head coach over in Chicago?
I thought that. So my plan for the Chicago Bears, because their offensive coaching has been so bad, was like, come on, it doesn't look like it's going to work with Fields. And I definitely don't want a new quarterback working with the same offensive coaching staff if I draft Caleb Williams. So to me, it was like, well, you get rid of the coaching staff anyway, and then that probably means you get a new quarterback and start there. But they fired Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator, on Wednesday morning. So that tells me that Eberflus is safe, and he fired the OC to save his job. So if they keep Justin Fields, that means it's going to be the third offensive coordinator in 4 years for him, or he's going to have to find another coordinator, and that's a hard thing to do. That's why when you hire that defensive-minded head coach, and it just does seem like the Chicago Bears are getting things figured out on the defensive side of the ball, and apparently everyone likes Matt Eberflus. The players do in Chicago, and it seems like the fans and the players are really behind Justin Fields as well. But it is so hard to find an offensive coordinator when you're defensive-minded head coach, because you have one good year, like Bobby Slowick. He's offensive coordinator for 1 year, comes from a Shanahan system, and everyone's like, okay, head coach, there you go. And that's all you get, 1 year with a good offensive coordinator. So, man, if you can find a good offensive-minded head coach, that's the way I would go for an organization, because once you have a good offensive coordinator, he's going to be gone and get a head coach job somewhere else anyway.
Bobby Slowick was with the 49ers regime for a really long time. He had a brief little stint, and not just 49ers. He was in Washington with Kyle. Had a little break where he was over at PFF, maybe one of Brian Peacock's people. Did you guys cross paths with PFF?
I don't know. So I was fully remote. I don't know if he was remote or he was in Cincinnati there in the main office. But he was doing big time stuff and a part of the big grading system and doing a lot of teaching with a lot of the folks that were at PFF. I was mostly just charting routes during the Chip Kelly era of the 49ers. And I was like requesting 49ers games early on that year. I did some other like articles and infographic stuff and just some other things at PFF. But my main thing I did was charting routes in 2016, which was god awful. So I had to start requesting to not have the 49ers because I couldn't bear to watch that and chart those routes anymore.
Slowick kind of pulled an Eric Crocker here. All right. I like to insert myself into some of these things. But back in 2005, I was going to Delta College, and I was having both the offensive guys and defensive guys try to recruit me to come to the junior college. And I could have played receiver, could have played defensive back. I chose DB because I'm like, you know what? I see more of a future in defensive back, I kind of stand out a little bit more. I think I'll be more highly sought after having my height, and I think that definitely helped me have opportunities at the next level. Well, Slowick was a defensive guy, and he was like a defensive analyst, and then kind of worked his way over to the offensive side with the 49ers. And lo and behold, here you go. First coordinating position. You are the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. And now that might bump him up to a head coaching job where he's calling offense. And there have been other guys that did the opposite. And I don't know if it's working out for him right now. Matter of fact, it's not. The Chargers head coach that they just had, he was actually like a quarterback in college, an offensive guy. Then he went to the defensive side, got hired as a defensive head coach or a defensive coordinator for the Rams. and then was the defensive head coach for the Chargers, and then he got fired. But maybe he should have stayed on the offensive side of things.
Yeah, so and Bobby Sloak's dad is a coach too and was a defensive coordinator. So I think that's why he was on the defensive side at first, and then was a defensive assistant with the Washington football team at the time, 2011 to 2013, and then defensive quality control with the 49ers at first with Kyle in 2017 after that 4 years off doing PFF stuff and doing other things. And then jumped to the offensive side of the ball. It's wild. And so he's only been on the offensive side of the ball since 2019. He was an offensive assistant. Then he goes passing game specialist in 2021, then offensive passing game coordinator for 1 year in 2022, then offensive coordinator. I mean, that's a whirlwind to all of a sudden be jumped up every single year. Boom, 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 to a new role and potentially even a head coach this offseason. So that's a pretty wild ride for Bobby Slowick.
I'm trying to see, okay, playing career. Bobby Slowick attended Michigan Tech University. Haven't heard of that school. And he played
smart guy school. I can already tell you.
Well, he played wide receiver for them.
Well,
in 2006, 2007, 2008.
Yeah, he's a smart guy to get into a tech school, but non-athlete, so he's still able to play football at a non-athlete school.
I said, I've never heard of that school, and people are like, well, Croc, you went to University of Arkansas Monticello. We ain't never heard of that either.
Nope. I hadn't heard of it till I met you.
Tim McDonald, he was my defensive back coach for the Jets. And he said, Croc, what the hell is Arkansas Monticello? Like, he said it all wrong. And he's like, where is that? I'm like, what is in Arkansas?
Don't disrespect the fine city of Monticello, Arkansas. Come on.
Yeah, shout out to Coach Tim McDonald.
49ers, they're getting healthy during the bye week. So some notes on that and what players we might see on the field in the divisional round of the playoffs next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Jace Medical and the Jace Case. And, you know, we always come here to talk sports, and usually sports is a way to escape from the crazy realities of real life. But let's talk real for a minute about preparing for real life. And according to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin in the middle of flu season. And maybe you have some specific needs for your family and medications that you need, that your family needs. And maybe a supply chain issue could prevent you from having the life-saving medication that you or your family really needs. Maybe you are on vacation and you're in a place where you're not sure if you're going to have access to the medication you need. The Jace Case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, UTIs, respiratory infections, skin infections, among many, many others. This stuff could happen to any of us. So visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician visit. And it will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important than right now to be prepared. So go to jacemedical.com. That's Jace Medical, Jase medical.com, and use our offer code Locked On to get $20 off your order. Again, that is jacemedical.com. So I listened to George Kittle. He was on with Eric Armstead on his podcast, and they were kind of talking about this week and how they're getting healthy. And George Kittle's hitting the hot tub or the cold tub or maybe both, and eating a lot of food and just kind of hanging out and putting his feet up and trying to rest and recover from a long season and be close to 100% as possible. And it sounds like Eric Armstead could have gone if they really needed him to, according to Kyle Shanahan. Last week or in week 17 if they'd have needed that game, or week 18 if they'd have needed that game against the Rams. And so Eric Armstead looks like he ought to be back at practice this week and getting ready for next week in that game. And Juwan Jennings as well is out of concussion protocol. So those were 2 big ones that the 49ers were missing out on in the last few weeks. Those guys look like they're going to be ready to go. And to be honest with you, when you look around the rosters around the league and some of these other teams that are going to be playing each other, and potentially the 49ers playing a team on a short week that's playing Monday Night Football while the 49ers have a bye. The 49ers are coming into this offseason or this postseason as one of the healthiest teams in the entire tournament.
That's very reminiscent of, was it 2019, where started the postseason, you had a bye week, and all of a sudden the 49ers put out one of the most epic hype videos with Quan Alexander coming back. And D Ford, he was much healthier at that time. Like they were locked and loaded, ready to go. I hope we have some flashes of that 2009 kind of resurgence and then, carry that momentum into the rest and actually finish the job this time. But a healthy 49er team is scary because I know a lot of teams are looking at, where are they weak? What are the deficiencies? I would assume that it's not being as healthy, not having Hargraves and Armstead there in the middle. But when you have everybody back, man, this is a loaded team, and 100% will be the favorites as long as they have the health on their side. I mean, I think that's the main reason why they lost last year. You got unhealthy at the most important position, your quarterback, early in the playoff game. The Eagle fans try to dismiss it. Everybody said they were making excuses, but they kind of showed them what kind of machine they are if they have their quarterback relatively healthy throughout the season.
I mean, the 49ers completely broke the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles were flying as high as you possibly can, talking so much trash going into that game against the 49ers.
A lot of boo-hoos.
And
hey, man, we'll catch you on Sunday.
And Deebo Samuel caught him on Sunday in the 49ers, and they wrecked him. And they have not been the same since. I think there's major problems there, and a lot of it is confidence. They don't even know what to do to fix themselves, those Philadelphia Eagles. And yeah, the 49ers are super healthy right now. They got to keep their quarterback healthy and upright. And Trent Williams, big that he's getting a week off as well. So it's super pumped for that one to see a healthy 49ers team here that's just a couple of wins away from having an opportunity to do something really special this year. So I'm excited. I'm freaking jacked, as Pete Carroll said. This was Pete Carroll's quote, which made me think that it doesn't sound like this is the last he's going to coach. So talking to reporters, Pete Carroll said, quote, "I'm freaking jacked. I'm not tired. I'm not worn down. What's coming now? I've got no idea, but I'm excited about it." So he says he's going to hang out and be there to support John Schneider and ownership in the search for his successor. So he's going to be around a little bit in Seattle. I don't know if that means he's going to take a year off, or as soon as they find a head coach, he's going to be looking for his own job somewhere. But I don't think it's the last we've seen of Pete Carroll, because I think he's a lifer. And when you hear him, how jacked he was when he was talking about what's next for him, I think we're going to see him somewhere, maybe even back in the college game. Who knows?
For an old guy, and he is old, 72, 73.
Yeah, something like that.
He still has a lot of bounce in his step, a lot of energy as well. I just know that, one, his wife is probably like, all right, dude, give it up. Like, I've been waiting for you to be home full time so we can kind of just go on vacations and hang out and whatnot. But, get to know your wife a little bit. But I don't know, man. Like, it has the game, I don't want to say passed him by, but between him and Nick Saban's old too. And I don't think the game has passed him by, but maybe some of their methods, they're like, these young guys, they're different generations. I'm not dealing with this anymore. Maybe he does just want to kind of ride off in the sunset.
And he probably doesn't want to go through what Bill Belichick's gone through the last few years, right? And when it just starts to get really hard and difficult and you're not winning, and it's like, yeah, did the game pass one of the greatest of all time, Bill Belichick, pass him by? Is it just all about the quarterback, right? So that's what's interesting to me. If Belichick leaves, is he going to go chase a team that's already got a good quarterback, or go to Washington because they got the second pick? Patriots have the third pick and better chance of getting a better quarterback. I don't know. But it's fascinating. Really could be massive with some of the head coaches that are potentially out there, and a couple that we don't know if they're out there, but they might be out there and available for teams to hire as well this cycle in 2024. I got one more note real quick here, Croc, on Kyle Shanahan. So he's tied for the 5th longest tenured head coach in the NFL, and he's now coached the 3rd most games in 49ers history. 115 games he has coached, to a 64-51 regular season record, 6-3 in the playoffs. Still no titles. The only guys ahead of him now are George Seifert, who he'll pass next year. 128 games George Seifert coached for the 49ers. He was 98-30, 10-5 in the playoffs with 2 titles. Took over that Bill Walsh team from different defense coordinator to head coach from that 89 and the 88-89 back-to-back titles. And Seifert got the second of those back-to-backs. And then obviously got the one in 94 as well. And of course, number one is Bill Walsh, 152 games coached in 49ers history with a 92, 59, and 1 record, 10-4 in the playoffs, and 3 ships. So Kyle Shanahan getting that title is huge, getting that ring, but he's not that far off. If this boat keeps floating the way it is for Kyle Shanahan, the 49ers, he may be number 1 on the list when this is all said and done. And who knows, maybe for titles, but definitely for games coached in 49ers history.
Well, he has a quarterback, and I think, unlike some of the other guys, even Bill Walsh, Walsh kind of had to build up to getting. All of a sudden, he has Joe Montana, and then Joe Montana had to take his lumps. Kyle's been winning ever since taking over with Brock Purdy. So now you have your quarterback. He's on the rookie contract right now. I don't see them going to stop losing anytime soon.
Yeah, it'd be like, what if Bill Walsh got Joe Montana in 1984 instead of 1979? And that's when that started with Joe Montana. And how long would that have gone? And how long?
Yeah.
There's burnout, but I don't know. Kyle Shanahan's young too for a head coach that's already been coaching this long. So interesting.
He's also been around it his entire life.
Yeah.
So it might be just a little different. Like, my wife, she's always like, oh, you always got some football stuff going on. And it's like, man, I live and breathe football. It's just that's just been me. Like, I don't know how to burn out from doing football stuff. So that might be Kyle Shanahan as well.
And tell her, hey, honey, you should be thankful I didn't take that head coach job, because that's even more hours. And if you were coaching at a higher level and all of a sudden, okay, let's sleep 6 hours and work the rest of the hours of my day, you wouldn't be seeing a lot of your family in that case.
And part of it is kind of knowing yourself and what you kind of prioritize. And that was been my thing with not trying to pursue, coaching in college and the different places, because just the hours, the days, being on the road, being a scout, like all those things, it can take a toll for even lower pay than streaming from your house and being able to be with your family.
The way things are going, we'll probably have some more huge news to talk about on tomorrow's episode of Locked On 49ers. But if not, we're going to be breaking down the teams the 49ers could be facing after the wild card round, looking ahead at the divisional round and looking ahead at the potential opponents for the 49ers that we'll be facing off this weekend. All that and more coming up tomorrow to finish up the week on Locked On 49ers. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen. Make sure you check out the new 24/7. It's the first of its kind 24/7 sports network, Locked On Sports Today. You can find it on YouTube. Subscribe up there. All the local experts like Croc and myself, the national shows, and have you covered 24/7. It's a all the time streaming channel. You can find it on your Amazon Fire. It's coming to other smart TVs near you as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube to Locked On Sports Today. Croc and I back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.